Dude, put on some pants. Why do you have diapers on?
Just had my prostate removed last week.
Oh man, I'm so sorry to hear that. You know, buddy, a close buddy of mine, my workout partner from high school, we played football together.
Yeah.
I had his removed. Are you okay? Do you know yet?
No, I'm getting results. The problem was there were no symptoms. It was a random check, so it was already extended a little bit. But I get the pathology on Monday. Yeah.
I'm pulling for your brother.
Thank you.
Cancer is no fun. Yeah.
No. You can make fun of it, though.
Oh, your diaper? Abso-fucking-lutely.
Yeah, no. Diaper is on the table for this podcast.
How could it not be?
I'm sorry you have cancer, but dude, you're wearing a diaper.
My only question, Matthew, is why you were wearing the diapers before.
Hey, we don't kink shame here, Olen.
Okay.
Well, we might.
So I'm going to roll into this, and Vinny, I'm sure you'll figure out the format as we go.
Okay.
Welcome to the Too Old or Pure Gold Movie Podcast. In today's episode, we're discussing the 1982 action movie First Blood. The format of our podcast, two Gen Xers rewatch beloved movies from our youth to find out, are they really as good as we remember? To help us debate and ultimately pass judgment, we ask our millennial co-hosts to watch these movies for the first time and help us determine, are they too old or pure gold? I'm your host, Olen Vanderleeden, representing Gen X. With me today is my Gen X co-host and host of the Dark Poutine podcast, Matthew Stockton.
Hi, everybody.
Also joining us today is a special guest host, First Blood fan Vinnie Tortorich, representing the Boomers.
All right.
And before I introduce our millennials, I just want to say thank you so much, Vinny, for joining us on this podcast. I'm a huge fan of yours. I was super excited when I heard that this is your favorite film from the 80s and that you'd be willing to join us to break it down. And if you don't mind, I just want to tell our audience a bit about you before we get into this. And you can correct me if I get anything wrong. But, I mean, I doubt there's anyone that doesn't know Vinnie Tortorich, but for those of you who don't, Vinny's a renowned fitness expert, author, podcaster, and motivational speaker. Vinny is the host of the Fitness Confidential podcast, of which I'm a regular listener, as is my wife. Vinny has written the very successful book Fitness Confidential, of which we have 2 copies in this house. Vinny is also a documentarian who created and starred in Fat, a documentary. Watch that, that's excellent, which topped the charts for independent films, and Dirty Keto, released last year. Vinny's also the founder of 3 companies, Pure Vitamin Club, Pure Coffee Club, and NSNG Foods. Did I get that okay, Vinny?
Yeah, when you say it like that, it really makes me sound like I'm more successful than I think I am. but thank you.
Well, all I can say is if you're a First Blood fan, you've got all the things you need to be successful.
Yeah.
Not only do we have 2 copies of your book in this house, but we also have Anna Vocino's Eat Happy book, which we also love. We use that regularly. Okay, back to the episode. Let's get this rolling. Representing the millennials today, we have regular millennial co-host Anthony.
Hello, hello.
We have Sean returning.
Hello.
And we got a lot of generations in this episode. Representing Gen Z, we have the lovely Nicole.
Hello.
Today's movie is the 1982 action thriller First Blood, the movie that started the Rambo franchise starring Sylvester Stallone. The movie was directed by Ted Kotcheff, and I think Ted Kotcheff is an unlikely director to produce such an amazing and nuanced action film, since he's largely known for comedies. He directed Fun with Dick and Jane and North 40 Dallas before this, and Weekend at Bernie's after this. Okay, the tagline from the movie poster is, "This time he's fighting for his life," which confuses me a little bit because I think he was fighting for his life in Vietnam, and he's really fighting his demons more than for his life in this one. But we established previously that tagline writers are not at the top of their game in the 80s. IMDb describes this movie as a veteran Green Beret is forced by a cruel sheriff and his deputies to flee into the mountains and wage an escalating one-man war against his pursuers.
It's true. He was a cruel sheriff.
He was. And for those of you that have not seen the movie, I asked my 92-year-old dad, representing the silent generation, to watch First Blood and summarize the plot.
This is my favorite part.
Here you go. This is what a 92-year-old got out of the movie.
First Blood is about a decorated Vietnam War veteran who is searching for an old army buddy, but he is told that his friend has died, unfortunately. Well, he walks into town. He is spotted by the sheriff, Will Teasel. The sheriff doesn't like drifters, and he drives him out of town. When the sheriff drops him off, he walks back into town, or tries to, but the sheriff says, "Okay, I'm arresting you." And he's abused and horribly treated, and this brings back memories about torture that he experienced in Vietnam. Rambo manages to fight his way out of the sheriff's station, and he grabs a motorcycle. This is an interesting sort of chase, and he escapes into the woods. The sheriff organizes a search party because he's furious, and the deputy sheriff, who is sort of a cruel guy, he tries to kill him from the helicopter. So Rambo then throws a rock at him and he falls to his death. Rambo wants to surrender, but they keep shooting at him, and so he has no choice. He has to fly deep into the woods. And Rambo is using guerrilla tactics to eliminate all his pursuers one by one. It's a very good scene. But suddenly we see an old Rambo commander, and he says, "Look, you guys, I know Rambo, and you're getting nowhere with him." And the sheriff says, I have to get him anyway. At this point, a rocket launcher is fired at the entrance of an abandoned mine where Rambo is hiding. But he escaped, and he sees that there are all these military trucks. He jumps on the truck and he throws the driver out, and he races to Hope. In Hope, he sets the gas station on fire, and then he discovers that the sheriff is on top of the building, and he manages to shoot him, but he does not want to kill him. He goes to the colonel, who he holds him, and he talks about all the things that had happened in Vietnam and the terrible times, and how he lost so many friends. The colonel then convinces Rambo that he'll be killed unless he surrenders. So he says, "Okay," and that's the end.
So for the record, my 92-year-old dad and my mom both loved this film. And trust me, they don't love every film, Vinny. My dad had nasty things to say about the movie Porky's when we did that episode.
I got to go back and find that.
If I can summarize, he said Porky's was worse than Nazis. So
He said, "I lived through the war and this movie was worse." That's what he said about Porky's. But that's a different episode.
yeah.
So before we get into the discussion, I just want to do a quick round table and get everybody's reaction to this. And I get to go first this time. Everybody here, I think, knows this is actually my number one favorite film of all time. Vinny, this isn't even my favorite film of the 80s. This is my favorite film of all time. It's ahead of Roadhouse for me, which is my second favorite. And I think it's one of Stallone's best performances as an actor. And I'm going to say this movie is flawless. So from story to dialogue, acting, scenery, stunts, cast, I think they nailed it all. And Vinny, tell me, what did you think of this movie?
Well, first off, I became a Rambo fan, not a Rambo, a Stallone fan with Rocky, the original Rocky. And then Rocky 2 came out, and it was like, oh my God, lightning has struck twice. So I was a big Rocky fan. I remember, 81, I was in college. I was playing college football. Didn't really see much in the way of movies. I was aware that a movie called Rambo came out with Stallone, and I thought that was sacrilege. It's like, wait a minute. Rocky is doing something different. It's like I couldn't even wrap my head around it. So it came and went, and it wasn't on my radar. And then around 1983, it was already on. This is the millennials will not understand this. It was on one of the three networks late one afternoon on a Saturday, and I see this movie's coming on, and I see Rocky dressed in, a green coat and, Vietnam boots and the whole thing. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to like this, but I'm going to give it a watch. And right from the opening scene, when he's talking to his buddy's mom, right, she's hanging the laundry. And that's when I realized that Stallone was actually, and this is going to sound hard to believe. It's like, man, this guy's got range, right? He's not doing the Philadelphia dummy anymore, right? He's acting with his eyes. You realize that he can actually act, right? It wasn't just this kind of Philadelphia, tomato can of a boxer, right? And so there was more to the film than I think people realized. And I became a fan of Rambo, right there. Now, you'll sit there and go, come on, Ben, the movie wasn't that great.
I'm not saying that.
You would have to look at what's coming down the pipe in the 80s, right? And this was the early 80s. Vietnam was only over by like 6 or 7 years when the movie came out. And you think about it, 1975 was when troops finally left there.
Yep.
So I knew people. My parents were school teachers. I knew people like this guy that came back and they were spat on and they were disenfranchised and they couldn't. I grew up. I'm only 62, and I remember those people like it was yesterday, because some of them were family members. So I had a place in my heart for this character, right, who's going around and trying to find who he was, right? So that's what caught me right from the beginning, before it got into all the shenanigans.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you hit 2 points there that I really like. One is that he can act, and when we get to the favorite Stallone movies, I'm going to give you another example where I think he really delivered on the acting. But, also, given that you knew people like this, do you actually think it was an reasonably accurate depiction of how people treated Vietnam vets coming back?
Yeah, I didn't know any Green Berets, but I knew guys, because my parents were school teachers, right? They were young school teachers when it was all going on. And I remember growing up, being a young kid, 1969, 1970, and hearing about people going away and then coming back in body bags. And here's something, that the millennials won't know. And I'm guessing Matthew might. Matthew, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
54.
And you have a diaper. Okay. So you're a few years younger than me, 8 years younger, but, I remember that, most people don't know this, but during the Korean War, that was in the 1950s, before we were even born, the federal government figured something out. Most people don't know this. They figured out that if you take people from Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the northern part of Florida, you could put them in a swamp anywhere around the world, and they hold up better than anyone else, right? So if you're going to go into a different swamp somewhere else in the world, get a lot of people from Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. And that's where they grab people from to throw them into Vietnam. So I think we saw a lot more of that than anywhere else in the country, because they don't get malaria. These people have been bitten by mosquitoes their whole life, right? So I did know a lot of these people, and they would come back and go, when I was there, I was planting mortars, and I was doing this, and I was doing that. And now I'll come back here, and I can't even get a job sweeping around a hardware store. Yep. So I remember hearing those stories. Can you imagine being a Green Beret and being at that level? And you come back and, Jane Fonda is yelling about, people don't remember. Do you guys remember what Jane Fonda was like during during Vietnam?
Yeah.
Definitely. I was quite young, but I've seen lots of the footage.
Yeah, she was Hanoi Jane. She went and sat on a tank, and these people. Nobody wanted to go over there and fight. We were thrown into a war that the French started. I don't want to get into the politics of it, but it wasn't even our war. And I think he uses that line in the movie.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It wasn't our war. And, so yeah, there was a lot of that for me in that movie because my dad was an American history professor, and I guess I knew more about it than anyone else. The parts I found ridiculous, and your dad talked about it, was Brian Dennehy. By the way, there's only two characters who could have been the sheriff: Brian Dennehy or maybe Ned Beatty. I don't know if you guys remember
Ned Beatty. Wow. I've got some casting rumors in here that we could talk about later, but Ned Beatty is not on there. I could not picture him as the sheriff.
Whenever you have Ned Beatty as a small town sheriff, he's doing a lot of sweating, right? He's always like mopping his brow. It's like yeah, I'd like to know who you have there, but it's funny that they got Brian Dennehy, who's great in that role, right?
Also great in every role. He's great.
Yeah, I can't believe he's no longer with us. But yeah, Brian Dennehy did a great job. But the question becomes, what's in it for you? The guy just wants a meal. And, it's kind of like every 80s movie is kind of tropey. You remember movies where, it's like, hey, pal, you would see the guys with the flip collars, and like in the movie Say Anything, hey, pal, you're from the wrong side of the tracks. You don't belong here. You can't come to this party, pal. And it was almost that same trope in this movie. I mean, Stallone didn't look like he smelled that badly. He didn't look like a homeless person. He's just a drifter. Right?
Yeah, I refuse to believe Stallone ever smelled bad.
Yeah. Well, he smokes a lot of cigars, but
the other irony, Vinny, is that this town. So, by the way, we're all Canadians here. And we live 90 minutes from where this was filmed.
Really?
And one thing I can tell you is that that blew my mind in this movie is when the sheriff says, like, you're asking for trouble dressed like that. Everybody in that town is dressed like that today.
I was about to say, I can go to my closet and pull off that outfit. Yeah. Right? I dress like that now. And so I didn't really get it. I didn't get that part of it.
He had pants, so he was dressed better than me.
Yeah. Well, is that your daughter?
Is
Nicole your daughter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nicole, does he have pants on right now? Should I call the authorities?
He's wearing bottoms, but he's the kind of guy who wears shorts in winter. So he's always wearing shorts.
Okay.
There's a guy I shoot skeet with who's from Boston. He does the same thing. It's like, dude, put on some pants. It's like 28.
Get a pair of sweatpants. You don't need to be wearing shorts in -10 weather.
Okay, well, before we get a lot deeper into this, I want to finish the round table here. Matthew, I want to hear what you thought of this movie because I'm nervous to ask you. Matthew is not the biggest Stallone fan, but I want to hear what you thought of it and then what the millennials thought.
No, Stallone should have stuck with porn. Okay, so I saw this movie when I was 12, right? And when you're 12-year-old boy, right, like blowing shit up and guns and stuff in the 80s, that was cool, right? Honestly, I find this movie like just a surface level attempt at being profound. And I think it's spoon feeding its audience easy tropes about trauma, but the problem I have with the movie is it's spoon feeding these tropes of trauma, but the film itself revels in the very violence that it's pretending to condemn. And if you look at like the follow-up Rambo movies that just became like, yee-haw, let's shoot everything up, right? I think that shows how thin this first one was. So I have a problem with it in that I don't think it did any justice at all to you know, my grandfather was captured by the Nazis, and he's in a prisoner of war camp. So, you know, I lived the aftermath of that by knowing him. But I just don't think it did anything really for any depth of. There's this like really bad sort of monologue by Stallone at the end that tries to sort of make up for it all.
You mean the one on my favorite parts?
Yeah, I just find it very surfacey, and this whole point that it's glorifying the violence that it's trying to condemn just doesn't work for me, right? Yeah.
Okay, millennials. Anthony, go. What do you think?
I watched this movie all the time as a kid because you loved it. And
okay, another bad parenting demerit.
And I remember loving it because, you know, it's a great movie. It's all action. And on this take, I didn't realize how not profound, but it was a lot deeper than I thought. And a lot about like PTSD and trauma and how the government and citizens treat soldiers after they kind of use them and cycle them through, and when they get back. And I liked it a lot more this time, actually.
Sean?
I was surprised how much I enjoyed this movie. It's actually enjoyable. It is quite flawed, I think. And this is something I'll be interesting to dig into, because a lot of why I think I was impressed with this movie was simply because it did things I assumed wouldn't be done in a movie in the 80s, touching on topics I would have thought were not topics that should have been talked about. And so maybe I gave it too much credit because I assumed at the time these things wouldn't be dealt with at all. I'm also going to add a fun story. You talked about the fact that this is filmed near us. I mean, I've driven through this so many times. In one of the early shots of like the main highway strip, I'm like, oh, that's definitely Hope. I'm pretty sure that's Hope. And my wife was watching with me, and she's like, is that because the sign said Hope above it? And I'm like, no,
Yeah. Sean's the smart one in the group.
Yeah, Vinny, every year they have an unofficial Rambo sort of weekend in the town, and you can buy like Rambo T-shirts and put your face in Sylvester Stallone's body in a cutout thing. It's all quite cheesy.
I might need to know when that's happening, because
we'll get you up.
Podcast party.
By the way, Matthew, you mentioned tropes, and yeah, it's a trope. The whole movie's a trope. Mm-hmm. And you know, in reality, it would never happen. I mean, if a sheriff brought someone in on no charge, and that guy was able to blow right through your deputies and get out of there, no one's going to go chase him with a helicopter and this and that. No. None of that would happen. They would just go, you know what? We already look bad enough. How in the hell do you go from, 3 people in your office, now you got a gaggle of people looking for this guy? And let's all face it, the movie doesn't actually start until the late, great John Crenna shows up.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And, you know, he has one of the best lines whenever Brian Dennehy says something like, hey, you coming here to protect your boy? And he goes something like, I didn't come here to protect John Rambo from you. I came here to protect you from John Rambo. And then there's lightning and thunder behind him.
Classic.
And that's when you go, oh yeah, man, I'm so in. I'm not leaving until I need to, But that's what makes it. That's what makes an '80s movie, right? It was
for sure. Yeah.
No pun intended. But all '80 movies were over the top, if you will.
Another great movie.
Yeah. So, my wife, who's an actress, we saw, like, about 4 or 5 years ago, we were like watching, and it came on. It was like the next movie up or something. We never watched anything like that. And I said, oh, honey, it's Rambo. And she was like, all right, I'll give it 10 minutes. And, kind of like what Sean said, she was like, oh my God, that was a good movie. And she's a British trained actress. She's a stage actress before a Hollywood
Yeah,
actor.
I'm Canadian and British as well. Spent most of my life in the UK, and I'm
Yeah.
shocked that I'm shocked that she I'm shocked that she liked it.
Yeah, yeah. She goes, because there's an entertainment value to it. Yeah, the speech at the end, thinly veiled. The whole thing is thinly veiled. But at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, did I enjoy myself for 90 minutes? And the answer is, oh yeah. Even if it's a train wreck, you can't look away. Right.
I still find it fascinating because I do force my poor dad to watch all of these movies we do on this. Some of them quite terrible, but he loved it, and so did my mom. Like they both watched this for the first time this week, and they loved it. Nicole, I'd love to hear what Gen Z thinks of this movie.
Well, first I just want to say my mom also likes this movie, and she told my dad that pretty soon after they started dating. So you know what he got her for the first birthday that they spent together?
I want to say a Bowie knife.
He bought her Rambo on DVD for the first birthday that they spent together.
I regret that, but I'm thankful that she saw it through. Yes, first birthday gift with the new woman that I love. I got her First Blood on DVD.
How did you manage to win over such a fantastic woman?
I think it was that movie. I think it was First Blood. I think Stallone did 50% of the heavy lifting there. That's the only way I can explain it.
Yeah. I went into this expecting to despise it because my whole life, all you've talked about is First Blood. I love Rambo. Oh my God, I love Rambo. He's the best. And my whole life, this poster of Stallone's face has been hanging over me my whole life. So I was expecting not to like it just out of spite, but I enjoyed it. I had fun. I didn't have a lot of complaints. It wasn't like I wouldn't go around being like, you have to watch it, it's amazing. But I enjoyed it for 90 minutes.
I thought it was interesting that as soon as he's out in the wilderness, he's in a muscle shirt, right? And he's got to figure out a way to get warm. So he finds a piece of rope, and then he finds a tarp. And with nothing more than an old tarp, a piece of rope, and a Bowie knife, he somehow comes up with couture that he wears for the rest of the movie.
That's so funny, because as soon as he put on that little makeshift outfit, my mom said, wow, he should be on RuPaul's Drag Race.
But Balenciaga could sell that for $1,000.
I was going to ask you, Vinny, do you think that jacket helped him at all? The tarp jacket?
There's no way it kept him. No, look, it's got to be warmer than not having a shirt on at all. But, I spent a lot of time hunting and out in the wilderness and hiking and climbing glaciers and everything. Seems like it would get hung up on everything, but he was moving around through the briars and everything pretty well with that thing on.
I actually have a question about Stallone movies, because I'm noticing a trend in the ones we've watched.
Okay.
Does he always lose his jacket in the first 5 minutes and then run around in a muscle shirt?
He does. He has it. He has a rider in all his contracts that he has to show off his guns.
In Cliffhanger, he's in the snow most of the movie without a shirt on.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, Matthew has that in his rider also.
I mean, it's also in his trend of wearing really thin things to be warm, because in Cliffhanger, he also had that sweater. That was the thinnest thing I've ever seen.
That was good. But I enjoyed it. I really love revenge, so it was fun for that.
I'm a sucker for that plot line, too. I'm also a sucker for quotes that this movie has constantly.
Oh, we'll get to the quotes. Just a couple other things I want to hit first. First of all, do we think this is an accurate depiction of a small-town sheriff office? And I'll note that the population of Hope at the time this was filmed was 3,500. And I went back and paused the movie. I counted 8 active policemen in that station.
The best-funded police station ever.
That's small town. They spend all their taxes on cops.
Not to mention a very young David Caruso was one of the cops.
I love him.
And they use him for, just to bring the movie along, right? They used him very well. It's like, you don't understand. He went through us like a hot knife through butter. What do you think you're going to do out here? This guy's and then when they find out he was a Green Beret, he goes, I knew it. I knew he was, So they used him to bring the movie along several times.
He was also the conscience of the movie too, right? Like telling Galt, like, what are you doing? You can't do this.
Yeah, he was a redeeming character for the cops.
At one point, me and him said the same thing out loud at the same time when that one cop starts just randomly hitting John Rambo with his nightstick for no reason.
Yeah,
and the cop goes, "What the F, man?" We said that at the same time. I thought that was fun.
Okay, bringing some of the trivia forward here. So they hired an actual Navy SEAL to choreograph that scene, and the actors said, I don't really believe this is realistic. So three of them they all tried to stop the Navy SEAL, and he went through three of them before they conceded that, yeah, this could happen.
That's pretty fun.
Yeah.
For sure.
So that is hilarious.
That part was believable,
I think so.
Whenever you send a rocket launcher into a cave and then Rambo just walks out the other side 5 minutes later, that was less believable. But out of all of the Rambo movies, that was the most believable because I didn't think I would admit this here, but one of us is wearing a diaper, so I'll just go ahead and admit it. At the end of it, I was watching it on Amazon. It just rolled right into First Blood Part 2.
Yeah.
Right.
So I ended up watching all of First Blood Part 2, where,
Of course.
and it gets less believable.
That's why we love Vinny.
And then, of course, it was 1 a.m, so the next day I watched Part 3, when it became even less believable. He's beating, the Russians on horseback, and,
Wow.
so it becomes more and more less believable, as he goes.
Well,
yes.
he became a superhero, quickly as the franchise changed, and I loved all of them. But this one, I think there's two great things about this movie in particular. One is the kill count is 1, and that was an accidental death. So
that was my favorite part of the whole thing, was that he actively chose to not kill anyone.
Yeah.
Okay,
Literally just injured them enough to stop them from hunting him.
Okay, here we go.
I'm going to say that's not true because the amount of bullets that man sprayed randomly in the city, the amount of random things he blew up, the gas station, which he did not check for an attendant before blowing up, there are civilian casualties.
I more meant in the forest. I forgot about he was losing it by that point. But when he was in the forest, he was choosing not to.
Okay, well, Sean, the script said that he ended up with 8 years in prison for his rampage. So I'm assuming there wasn't any collateral damage and accidental murders.
That's pretty good time for the amount of damage he did and the resources spent on him.
I think so too, yeah.
Well, I think some of those wasted resources should be blamed on the sheriff, who was wasting the resources for something that did not need the resources.
That sheriff had an attitude problem. I also wanted to ask, what is wrong with Galt? What do you guys think happened in Galt's life that he is that big an asshole?
Daddy issues for sure.
He is not a nice man.
No, he wasn't. I not to change that question, but the fact that he killed one man just by throwing a rock at a helicopter and the guy falls out, isn't that pretty much how it happens, if I'm remembering it right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's like, that's one of the most unbelievable parts of the movie, is that he just throws a rock randomly at a helicopter and a guy falls out.
Yeah.
No one had a problem with that.
That's what you get for standing at the very edge of a helicopter. I would expect a strong wind and you would fall out.
Galt was being really reckless with the way he was hanging out of that helicopter. I think it's on him.
The pilot was pretty dainty when the rock hits the window and he totally flails around and kind of causes it himself. But
I'm also not a helicopter pilot, but I'm pretty sure that flying a helicopter in a tight valley like that would be incredibly difficult, and the crosswinds would be pushing you around constantly.
Well, he did say he didn't want to go in there.
He did say that for sure. Yeah,
He
absolutely.
tried for maybe a brief second to be responsible before he caved immediately.
Okay, so quick question for Anthony. If you were dropped off at the end of the bridge and told to get out of town, would you have walked back too?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I would have.
I think everybody here. Vinny, would you have walked back? They tried to run you out of town?
Definitely. Yeah, but I'm always defiant, so I'm walking back in. Yeah.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. Nicole, the other thing I was talking about the acting, the only other thing I wanted to say about this movie that I really liked is the practical stunts too. Like, there's some really cool stunts here, and it's not, aside from the gas station, not huge explosions everywhere in a lot of these. It's a lot of really practical stunts, and there's some interesting trivia about it.
Well, my favorite move in a fight scene they had in this movie, which is grabbing the top of a door and kicking someone.
Oh yeah,
Big swing kick.
2-foot kick.
It's my favorite.
Definitely.
I had a question for you. Maybe you can touch on it later, Olen. If any of the stuntmen won, or this movie won any awards for the stunts.
So the Oscars don't have an award for stuntmen yet.
Oh yeah, we talked about that. Yeah.
Which I think is ridiculous. So some of the stuntmen should. So I'm going to spoil the trivia here. So the stunt where the cop car goes flying into the field, the first time that they filmed that, they did it at 70 miles an hour, and the poor stuntman broke his back.
Oh.
So when the car landed, he couldn't. His legs did not work when he tried to get out of the car. So that's the first one. Second one is that Brian Dennehy did his own stunt when he fell through the skylight, broke his ribs. And Stallone also. So the tree shot where he jumps off the cliff and into the tree, which by the way is a fantastic stunt. Like, I've never seen anything like that before. Stallone filmed the bottom third himself, and he also broke his ribs doing that. So he didn't do the whole stunt, but the last couple of branches, he took that hit himself. And yeah, these guys were working hard. And I think it's a shame there's not an award for stuntmen.
I wrote a note when I was watching it. It's like, this is before CGI.
Yeah.
And I took note of that. It's like, this is back when stunt people had to do stunts. And, you know, the aforementioned Ned Beatty and that movie, Deliverance, most of those guys got hurt in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They broke ribs. One guy messed up something else. You know, that movie was done on a budget.
Totally.
And when you think about what they were doing in the 70s and 80s with action stars just getting brutalized, and I've never trained Stallone, but I know people who have, you know, friends in Hollywood when I was there who did. He suffered back problems most of his career, lower back, like really bad lower back problems. So I think he was doing a stunt or in a fight in one of his movies or something and landed wrong on a rock somewhere. I don't know if it was any of the Rambo movies, but you know, he got tossed around a lot and just severe back pain most of his life.
Yeah, I can believe it.
No kidding. After watching those stunts,
I mean, he was certainly dedicated to this movie. I got so much good trivia on this. Okay, let's roll into best parts. I got a couple of here that I want to run by you guys. So these are my favorite things about this movie. See if you guys agree. Number one, tight 90 minutes.
Yes.
yeah,
Absolutely.
Vinny, this one's for you. What do you think of wild boar as a healthy snack?
I think it's a great snack. And I'm wondering what he did with the rest of the boar. You know, he kills it and then he just takes one hindquarter, you know?
Yeah, I don't think that's his usual hunting practice, but I mean, he was a little under pressure. So yeah, he just took one of the legs with him.
Yeah. He was, it's kind of like when you're on the road, you know, you'll get beef jerky. You're not going to just go get a whole steak.
Right,
So it's kind of
exactly.
that.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got the music, although not the one with the lyrics by Dan Hill. I have that in worst parts.
Speaking on the music, for me, I mean the first section of the scene in the forest is fantastic, and the section where he takes out the cops. But one of the things I really liked, which is related to the music, is the switch of ambience music from action movie style to horror movie style.
Yeah,
For when he's hunting them, I thought that was a nice touch.
yeah, that's great. Any other best parts you guys want to highlight?
spiky booby traps. I love a good booby trap.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. I love all of the booby traps. You know, it's funny. I thought I remembered the one where he's in the mud, and then his eyes open, but that was in I think 2. And I was like, wait a minute, did I look away for a second and he did that one? But that was in 2, right? When he's all packed in the mud. But yeah, I'm with you, Nicole. Great
I like when he moves out of the way and.
I was just gonna say that
the cop shoots his own guy that's tied up to the tree.
Yeah.
I don't know why. And then I also liked when the movie ended.
Okay, Matthew.
Oh my God. I have to say, as far as acting goes, Brian Dennehy, that moment when Rambo jumped out with the knife, and he said, in there you're in charge, out here I am, and then
in town you're the law, out here it's me.
Right, and then Brian Dennehy broke down and just sobbed for a moment. I mean, that was...
really showcases that fragile ego that's driving all of this.
There was something about that sheriff that he just wouldn't stop, even though he had so many points along the way where they said, like, this is a bad idea. You sure you want to go on with this?
Yeah, that whole scene was amazing.
It was good. It was the highlight.
I mean, Vinny said this earlier in the show. And I thought this exactly when it happened, when they started chasing him to the forest. I was like, they just leave him. It's sort of like, he's let him freeze out there, right? Like that. That's the reality.
All egos.
I'm never chasing.
But I believe there's some people who have fragile enough egos that they would be like, I need to get him.
Well,
I need to.
Driven by something, but we don't. Again, a lack of depth in the movie. You don't understand why he's so driven to get him.
Well, Troutman gave the best advice. He said, just let him go. You're going to pick him up working at a car wash someplace a month from now.
Yeah.
I think that was great advice.
Let him slip through. Yeah.
I also really loved about this movie the effective use of flashbacks. A lot of movie flashbacks suck, but these ones were good and they helped the story.
They were effective. Okay, any other best parts before I move it along?
No, I'll just piggyback off that the whole forest scene leading up when he steals the gun off Galt, and then he kills the 2 Dobermen, and then they think he's out of bullets, and he kills the last one, and then it turns into that whole kind of tense build up. I thought that peak for sure.
Even when he catches the kid in the woods, right? And he doesn't kill him.
And he just lets him go.
He tosses the gun into the woods.
He doesn't even injure him. He just runs. I
would have kept the gun, but that's me.
Thank you. I wondered the same thing. He's a survivalist and he's throwing a gun aside.
Yep, he has limited ammo, but I'm going to throw away a gun and ammo.
Maybe he doesn't want to steal from a child.
He didn't really throw it very far either. That kid could have grabbed it in 3 or 4 steps.
And shot it. Yeah.
Who doesn't want to steal from a child? It's so easy.
Okay, we'll move on now.
I love seeing Matthew shaking his head. Okay, worst parts. My number 1 worst part is Galt. I hate that guy.
Yeah.
I hate him, but he's necessary in this film.
Corruption in the police system makes me very angry. Dogs getting hurt makes me very upset. Even though they were trying to kill him, it still made me sad.
See, I feel like I blanked out at that point, because in my head, he just knocked them out. They're alive. They're fine.
Yeah, he knocked them out with bullets, Sean.
I don't remember hearing bullets. I just remember the squirrel. I really blocked that well.
There were bullets at one point. There was also a whimper and then a snap. It was very upsetting for me.
Okay, so for extra content, we're going to film Sean trying to put a Doberman in a sleeper hold and see how that goes.
Just knock him out. Little bonk on the head.
For worst scenes, everything with the mine. Everything with the mine, it lost all realism. It seemed ridiculous. Suddenly, Rambo seemed stupid. I don't really know what happened there. It's like everyone forgot. Other than the opening moment with all the men outside the mine being like, no, I'm not going. What are you talking about? You move in. No.
I liked that. Although I didn't love the caving scene as much until Dad told me that Sylvester Stallone is actually extremely claustrophobic, and then I was like, oh, it's cool. He's doing it anyway. That's nice.
Super claustrophobic, yep.
Is that why our top-level Green Beret slipped on a stair?
He didn't have the proper footwear.
No.
Okay, I want to move this along.
Olen, I got one bad scene that always haunts me in this movie, and it's in the beginning when he jumps the railroad tracks with the bike, and they have that super obvious ramp just left in the shot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, the other one is when he's driving the truck into town and it goes from day to night instantly. They make it look like he drove 4 hours to get back to town.
Yeah, that's not great.
Okay, you guys, any key quotes you want to hit just before I move into the ranking?
Don't look at me, look at the road. That's how accidents happen.
Yes, I loved that. Everything that's happening to him today, and he's still worried about road safety.
Okay, let me give you guys a quote and see if you can remember the scene. Assholes!
No.
Vinny, you remember that scene?
No, I don't.
That is when they're in the tent and the head of the National Guard is standing there and the deputies are telling Teasel like, we might have fucked with this prisoner a little bit in the cell.
Oh, yeah.
And that guy just goes, assholes!
Yeah.
I love the delivery.
One of mine was the trope, and when he says, "We ain't hunting him, he's hunting us." You know, again, it was kind of an '80s trope.
I'm
I
a
like
sucker
that.
for that trope, though. There's a bunch of those lines, and I enjoyed all of them.
I
I
love
won't
when
read them all out, but I wrote them all.
I liked John Rambo, winner of the Congressional Medal of Honor, survivor of countless incursions behind enemy lines, killed for vagrancy in Jerkwater, USA.
Yeah, that was good. And classic. God didn't make Rambo, I did.
Yeah, Richard Crenna had the best lines, and all. Without Richard Crenna, that movie's not what it is.
I agree.
None of them are.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
But that actually, Olen, that line I did appreciate because it's not him that made Rambo. It's about governments making soldiers, and there's a lot more behind that line than that line and those two men, right?
Agreed.
And the First Blood line is perfect too when he's on the radio.
Oh, they
with
drew
them.
First Blood?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
Another quote that stood out to me, just because I thought it was a very strange thing to say, was when they were hosing off Rambo, and he said, "What? Don't you like water sports?"
Don't forget to get him behind the ears.
Oh,
I don't think
okay.
he knows what he's saying.
Before you're arraigned, before you've actually been sentenced with anything, when you're just being put in holding, I don't think they hose you down and shave you.
They were trying to make him look
they
good
don't.
for his hearing.
They really just cared about him.
Which, I don't know why they wanted to make him look good for the hearing, because they wanted him to get charged.
Again, he looks like everyone else in that town.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna get to the ranking, guys. I want to see how this movie did. So, according to Box Office Mojo Worldwide, First Blood was the 13th highest earning movie at the box office in 1982. E.T. was the top earner at the box office in 1982, and First Blood was beat by movies like two older Pure Gold favorites, Tootsie and Porky's. Can you believe Porky's beat this?
That's upsetting.
It was also beat by Stallone's other 1982 masterpiece, Rocky III. So what a year for Stallone. First Blood did beat plenty of films in this year, including Conan. So score one for Stallone and his rivalry in those days. It also beat two older Pure Gold favorite, Firefox, an episode we just did recently, but barely. Chariots of Fire was the Oscar winner in this year, and since I think this movie was robbed of its recognition, I'm going to note that Henry Fonda was the best actor for this year on Golden Pond, and I mean, come on. Stallone did a better job.
Oh, please.
Well, I don't know if I can agree with you there. I thought on Golden Pond and the subsequent porn that came out about 5 years later on Golden Blonde, both great movies. Wait, I don't know. What did I just say?
We'll edit that in post.
So, there's no way that this movie, all right, so you said it was a top grossing movie, right? 13th top grossing movie.
Yep.
And I get it. Back in those days when you put out something like Porky's, a certain number of young kids are going to go see it. You got to remember there was no, Atari didn't exist yet, or maybe Atari did exist, but there was no video games, there was no nothing. People still went to see movies, right? And if you can have, boobies in a movie, you're going to get a lot of 15 and 16-year-old kids going to go see that movie.
Still works for me.
I see how that can beat out Rocky, but I'm going to guess that not Rocky, but Rambo. But I'm guessing that the critics wasn't so kind to Rambo. That would be my guess.
Let's find out. Vinny, give me your guess. So we like to do the Rotten Tomatoes thing. We like to get critics and audience. What do you think the scores are for this?
Well, it's about war, and being in Hollywood for as long as I was there, the critics don't like war. I don't think they really like Stallone. I'm going to say that Rotten Tomatoes is somewhere in the 30s. Let's say mid-30s, like 35. But I would bet that the audience probably doubles that, maybe 70.
Okay. Matthew, what do you think?
Critics. Sorry, there's a method to my madness. You can tell I'm a marketing guy. I'm like, yeah, what would they do and why? Critics 85, audience 90.
Really? You think the critics gave that movie an 85?
Yeah. Because, see, I actually have this thing where I always think that, I think maybe it's because I'm not American. I always think American critics give war movies, like, higher ratings.
It's also, Rotten Tomatoes is like up to date. So it's old reviews and new reviews too. So it does change.
Okay. See, I didn't know that.
So it's like secondary critics, not real critics, right? So.
Right.
Well, they're official critics, but it is up to date. So there's the original critic reviews, and then there's even up to today. If you're a professional critic certified by Rotten Tomatoes, you can still.
I'm sticking with my 35. I'm going to say they hated this.
Okay.
You know?
I'm thinking like an 85 critics with Matthew, and then like a 70 audience. I think critics liked it more.
Okay. Sean, what do you think?
I'm going to go with a 70 for the critics and a 75 for the audience.
I think 65 critics and 82 for audience.
We have a wide range this time.
I mean, Matthew, you win again, and Vinny, I'm sorry to say you're way off. Critics 86, audience 86.
Really?
Oh.
So critics loved it, audience loved it. So this is a beloved movie by everybody. So it's not just me.
That's crazy.
It's not just me and Vinny.
Yeah,
Everybody loves it.
I thought the critics would pan that movie, but now that I think about it, they were in love with Stallone back then because Rocky was an incredible breakout movie, and then Rocky 2 was, the first time a sequel actually did better than the movie, right? It was the first time a sequel made. So I think the critics were still in love with Stallone back then.
Except
Olen, what did Siskel and Ebert give it?
Oh, I will tell you that in a second. So, Vinny, one thing to note is that this is the first ever non-Rocky Stallone movie that didn't bomb. So,
Really?
Fist, Nighthawks, Paradise Alley, Escape to Victory, this is the first movie that wasn't a Rocky movie that was successful.
Wow.
So I'm not sure the critics were in love with him.
I don't think they knew what to do with Stallone back then, right?
No.
And he didn't know what to do. He had to kind of get equilibrium in his career and start figuring it out.
Okay, so let me just quickly ask then, Vinny, what's your top 5 Stallone movies?
Rocky and Rocky 2. I could have said first 4 Rockies and then, Rambo, but that would be cheating. But Rocky and Rocky 2. And then First Blood. And then Cliffhanger.
Oh, yes.
And then Over the Top.
Oh, I love Over the Top too. I mean, this is hard to do, but mine, First Blood, obviously, and I've got Rocky 4 next, and then Vinny. When we talked about acting, here's the other one I threw in there is Copland. I think Copland is another film where Stallone was just excellent. He did not play his usual tough self, and I thought he did a great job acting.
Is that the one where he gained some weight for the role?
Yep.
If I remember right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he was deaf in one ear. He was the small town sheriff, but it was the neighborhood where all of the big city cops lived.
Yeah, I should have given that one more thought because I think you're right.
Yeah, it's good. Anybody else? Any honorable mentions from the crew?
My favorite 5 Stallone movies are ones where they decided to go with a different actor instead of him as
You're such a negative Nancy.
only with Stallone. I don't get him.
You don't get him at all. You don't get what he is.
At all. It's he cannot act. He can't act.
Have you seen him? I think he's in his best role ever. They finally figured out a role for Stallone, and it's this Paramount thing where he's in
Tulsa Kings.
Tulsa King. He should have been doing mob movies a long time ago.
He's so good at it. Yeah, I agree, Vinny.
It turns out he can actually act, and they finally, he's good in Tulsa King.
And he looks good in a suit.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Vinny, how would you rate Stallone's physique in this movie? 'Cause to me, he was a little bit trimmer, and I thought he looked great.
Yeah, it was the first time, he was bigger and smoother, of course, in the original Rocky, and he looked the same in this as he did in Rocky 3, because whoever was training him at that point, said, look, you need to trim down more. We need to get more definition on you, not more bulk. Out of all of his movies, the most jacked he'd ever been was probably the third Rambo. And I would say, he was probably he was getting some help, some chemical help at that point, because he looked more like Frank Zane than he did. He was really...
We did Cliffhanger on this podcast, and Stallone said that he felt his best condition was Cliffhanger. That's when he felt he was at his best.
Maybe so, and that was around that time too, wasn't it? Maybe Rambo 3 and Cliffhanger? What year did those two, when did Cliffhanger come out?
Cliffhanger was late 80s, 86?
Yeah, 85, I think.
I should have it.
I think it's a couple years after this.
Somewhere in there, a couple of years after this. Because he went out of this, Vinny, and then he went into a run of really bad movies where he did...
It was 93.
Oh, wow.
93.
Oh, wow.
After this, he did Oscar, Rhinestone Cowboy, Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. He was struggling to figure out what he was going to do, and Cliffhanger was his first return to popularity.
Unfortunately, I know that you're going to be disappointed in me and need to change this, but I've only seen 3 Stallone movies, 2 of which were for this podcast. So my top 3 Stallone movies are Cliffhanger, First Blood, and Spy Kids 3.
Well, that's a good list.
And there's 2 that we didn't mention yet. I loved, not great movies, but fun. Demolition Man and Judge Dredd.
Of course.
I'm glad you mentioned Demolition Man. I love that movie, even though it's terrible. Also, to make you feel better, Nicole, I went through Stallone's entire IMDb. I think I've only seen 4.
Well, wait till we do Cobra and Tango and Cash.
Oh, bring me back for Cobra, please.
You got it.
You're always welcome.
It is the best, worst movie I've ever seen, period.
I can't wait.
I met Stallone in early 92 at Rennie Harlan's birthday party. That's the only time I actually met him. And it was right, they were getting ready to work on Cliffhanger together. And that's when it was like, I'd only been in Hollywood for like a year or so. And I also met Mick Jagger at that same party, because I think they were doing a movie called Drive or something like that, something with an F1 car at some point. And I don't think Rennie Harlan actually wanted Stallone in Cliffhanger. He had to beg to get that role.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Yep, Stallone begged him, and then Rennie said, if you're on this movie, you have to keep your mouth shut and just do what you're told. And he agreed, and it worked out for him, because that was really his return to popularity. I mean, he really had a bad run for a couple of years there.
I personally think it was his best movie.
Speaking of Mick Jagger, did you see that Marianne Faithfull died today? Marianne Faithfull died today. It made me sad.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
That is
I was just listening to her like 3 days ago and said, hey, is Marianne still around, right? And looked her up. Yeah, she's still going. And then she died today. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay, let me hit you guys up with just a little bit of trivia from this movie. So this is the most fascinating part to me. After watching the first cut of this movie, Stallone thought it was so bad that it would kill his career. He tried to buy it back. They refused. So he talked them into cutting the movie down and cutting a lot of his parts out and letting the other characters tell the story. The original cut was 3.5 hours.
No.
No.
Wow.
That would have been horrible.
Of Rambo?
The first cut of this movie was 3.5 hours.
That's
Okay,
It's a lot of forced
they
time.
made a really good call.
Yeah,
made a
that was
great
a
call.
great call.
To make him be a little bit less forward and let the other characters have a role. And I think it paid off because they had a great cast.
Yeah, and it's a great movie.
Vinny, that piece of canvas that he found was real garbage that the crew found in the woods, and they incorporated it into the film, and Stallone still has it as his favorite movie prop from this movie.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Sounds about right for Hope.
Someone was coming back for that.
David Morrell, who was the author of the book, prefers the movie to his book.
Sorry, there's a book?
Oh, yeah. It was based off of a character in the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyone want to start a book club?
I'm in.
First podcast in the book club is First Blood. Okay, so there's some interesting casting too. Kirk Douglas was supposed to be Teasel, but he quit the film when they didn't agree to his changes to the script. He wanted to kill Rambo in the end.
Didn't Rambo die in the book? See, to me, it would have been a great film if he died at the end, because you know what, I can actually see the book being quite good. Actually, I bet the book went into more depth about PTSD and all of the issues that they sort of. I wouldn't mind reading the book. Maybe I will.
It's funny
Well,
you
it's a
say
good
that,
thing we're
Matthew.
starting a book club.
It's funny you say that, Matthew, because I think the biggest negative to what they're trying, sometimes very heavy-handedly, to have as a message in this movie is the fact that there's a sequel. Like, I don't know of the good. I've never seen the sequels, but to me,
They're
like, if
amazing.
this movie was a one-off, I feel like it would be a much stronger story for Rambo's experience, because the idea of you having that traumatized man who shot up a town and bucketing him up and sending him out somewhere else. I mean, I don't know what the next story is, but
Well, let me say this. I think they're really almost two different characters. First Blood and then all of the Rambos, I think, are almost two different characters, because he becomes a superhero, just like any of the Fast and Furious characters, those sorts of tropes.
They were doing those ones for the money, 100%.
But in this one, he was definitely human, and they did not anticipate the sequels when they did this, because he thought it was going to kill his career. He tried to buy it back and shut it down.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
Crazy to me too. So, however you guys felt about this movie, I promise you that there's others who liked it more or less than you. There were a massive 157 10-star reviews on IMDb out of 603 total reviews. In general, the praise for the movie is that it's a different kind of action film with believable, flawed characters, reluctant violence, realistic action scenes that aren't overpowered by explosions and special effects, and a phenomenal cast. So, here's a few excerpts from those 10-star reviews. First Blood set a new standard for action films. James Bond was pretty much your standard action film star before, smooth and debonair, and nothing ever went wrong for him. Rambo bleeds, he cries, and he wears his emotions on his sleeve. This is someone that many of us can relate to. This is honestly a near perfect movie. It's literally 90 minutes long, and they go fast as a bullet. I remember watching this movie on VHS with my father when I was 4 years old. That might be a little bit on the early side. And now we hear from people who liked it less. There were only 5 one-star reviews compared to the 157 10-star reviews. So I guess the fans have spoken. Let's find out what these turds have to say. Search and Destroy says, crap, crap, crap. The novel was a deep depiction of two men very different from the garbage popcorn movie. The book remains factual. Does this guy think that the book was nonfiction? Anyhow, this reviewer is borderline hostile when he says, I found all the Rambo flicks to be pathetic, boring, and worthless. This movie is awful beyond belief, and this is one of the most overrated movies ever made. It was terrible, tedious, and irritating from beginning to end. I hate this movie. I think it was the biggest disgrace for the action genre, and I think it's the worst movie ever made. That is a bit harsh. And finally, I have a gut feel that this reviewer lives in a small town. He says, In a real small town in middle America, Rambo would last 60 seconds. As soon as he blew up the gas station and the ammo shop, the good old boys and gals would have left the nearest bar, grabbed their rifles from their trucks, and finished him off in seconds. And there you have it. Matthew, you asked about Siskel and Ebert, so I'd love to hear what they thought looking back. So Gene Siskel appreciated the film's intense action sequences and Sylvester Stallone's physical performance. However, he felt that the film's message was too heavy-handed and cliched. He criticized the ending, describing it as overly dramatic and predictable. Roger Ebert also acknowledged Stallone's performance in the film's well-paced action sequences. He praised the scenes where Stallone's character is on the run in the forest using his survival skills. My dad also did that. However, he criticized the film's message, feeling that it was delivered in a heavy-handed manner. Ebert also felt that the ending was too predictable and did not work as well as the rest of the film. They both gave it a thumbs down.
That's funny, because today I think the ending was unpredictable, because I expected him to go free. I expected him to escape. Yeah. The last thing I would have expected, even though I know there's more movies, I would have expected him to die before I expected him to turn himself in.
That's really interesting, because I've seen it so many times I can't even think about the first time I saw it. But did you guys expect that ending?
No, I remember. I did not. Never. Yeah, it always felt a little bit off as a kid. Now it makes more sense, but definitely not. Doesn't flow.
Well, they should have had my dad as a narrator, because I like the way he describes it. That Troutman said, "You should give up," and he said, "Okay."
Yeah, I like that he summarized that whole emotional breakdown in speech as, "You should turn yourself in." All right.
And perhaps some of the other generations can tell me if this is true or not. Because, yes, the ending scene, heavy-handed, and I think there are better ways you could have ended that movie. But I remember being surprised that they had their big, tough guy character cry and be vulnerable. Sure, heavy-handed. I was surprised from an 80s era movie to see that.
Oh, me too. Well, and he held hands with his commander and hugged. You never see men do that in 80s movies.
That was a good impression.
Apparently you didn't see Rocky 3. Or no, Rocky 3. There's a lot of hugging on the beach.
I've done a terrible job raising this one.
Well, if it helps, my first movie I ever saw was at 3 months old, and it was The Matrix. So
that is
I think that says a lot about how you raised me.
That is a fact. Sean, I just want to say a couple of points about that scene, because actually I think that's really interesting. One of the points I wanted to make about that scene is that the stories that he told were actual stories that he heard from Vietnam vets. So apparently those are true stories, just not his experience. So he was recounting actual stories.
That's a really nice touch.
Yeah, I thought it was a really nice touch. And I, too, I mean, when you talk about acting, Matthew, I know you don't think that Stallone is an actor, but I thought he did a great job there. And I did love the choice to make him break down. But I have one last question, because in that speech he says, when I was in Vietnam, I had my whole crew with me. I don't even have one friend now. Do you think he was trying hard enough to make friends? Because he looked pretty cool to me. I think he could have had a couple of friends.
He wasn't trying hard.
Well, he was trying to find his old friends. He didn't think to make new friends.
I think he should have gone to the Legion.
Although, to be fair, if most people were like that sheriff, I don't think a lot of people were giving him an opportunity to be friends.
That's true, but go to the Legion, play a little cornhole, go for the meat draw. I think you could make some friends.
Yeah, the problem is that they, it's the character is more dynamic than we would want to believe, right? On one level, he's this guy, who has these war flashbacks, right? When he sees the razor and, he's in Vietnam being sliced up. And now he's on automatic pilot when he's out in the woods, right? Handling business. But then at the end, he breaks down. He becomes human, right? Mm-hmm. And he talks about, his friend right next to him who gets blown away, and he just starts sobbing, which he's coming out of being that guy and going back into being the other guy, right?
That's...
So I think they were trying to show a dynamic, that this guy was more than just one stroke.
Yeah, I got that.
I think it was a good effort, just not always the tactful hand it needed every moment. But I have a question for you, Vinny, because I I was not around for the Vietnam War. I am aware of some of the after effects. I've read on it a lot, seen movies on it a lot. I know there was a lot of divisiveness in the U.S. around it, and I can understand being mad at the government around the war and all that, but did people really target the soldiers so much? Because I feel like they had no choice, and that just, I don't know. It surprises me. Maybe it shouldn't.
Yeah, well, it was a real deal, where they got spat on in airports when they came back, right? To the point where they would even tell them, listen, when you get off the plane, someone's going to yell at you and spit on you and call you a baby killer and all this stuff, and they didn't want to be there either. No one wanted to go to Vietnam, right? It wasn't our war. Yet we were sending 18-year-olds right out of high school. Can you imagine, right out of high school, and they're sending you to basic training, and then they're dropping you off? It's almost unbelievable. I mean, Jimi Hendrix was there. He was a paratrooper. So yeah, I don't know why the hippies decided to hate the guys coming back, because they were on the same side. They didn't want to go either. They had to go.
It was a draft. A friend of mine, he was in the British military. He taught me a saying, hate the war, love the soldier.
Yeah.
Right. Which I've always stood by. It's right. These kids, because they're kids often, it's not about their choice. They're either drafted or they're there for lots of other reasons. And, be angry with why people are throwing wars, and be angry and hate the war, but don't take it out on the poor kids that have to go and do it.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
So we're very close to the end here. Vinny, I don't want to keep you longer than we promised, but remake, we usually just quickly ask, does this movie deserve a remake, prequel, or sequel? And I think we all know that there's 4 sequels to this movie. Vinny, have you seen them all?
I've seen them all. I liked them all except for the last one, Last Blood. I thought was horrible.
My favorite of the 4 is Rambo 4. I thought that was really good. The Cambodia one. Oh, that was excellent.
I haven't seen it, but I've seen the same YouTube clips dozens of times.
Very over the top.
Okay. And I honestly don't think there's any way to remake this. Like, this needs to be left alone.
It's lightning in a bottle.
It's lightning in a bottle.
It is lightning in a bottle. And you can't do a prequel, because the prequel is First Blood. I mean, what are you going to do? Put him in war before that?
No, that would just be, that would not be a good idea. I agree. It wouldn't
be entertaining to just watch him in war. It would just be sad.
Only thing I would sign off on is a prequel with Galt. I want to find out what messed that guy up.
What made him so angry? Yeah.
I'd like to see a little piece of his home life.
Galt's childhood trauma movie. Let's make it happen.
That could be entertaining. Okay, but just one last word on remake, because I loved this, that they did attempt a Bollywood remake in 1985.
No way.
Oh, that would be awesome to watch.
Which I would have watched.
I'll watch that now.
Okay, so we are at the end of the podcast, and I need to ask everybody on the panel here, is this movie too old or pure gold?
Pure gold.
Pure gold.
It wasn't fully my thing, but I think it is pure gold.
Vinny?
Did everyone else answer? Matthew, you didn't answer yet?
Too old.
It's too old. I'm pure gold. This is pure gold.
This is pure gold. This is pure gold. I love this movie.
Vinny, I'm usually the odd person out.
The antagonist. The bottom line is I saw it this week for the umpteenth time, and like I said, I ended up watching the second one right behind it. I sat for 3 hours.
Wow.
Watching Rambo.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I wouldn't say that this is like a movie that I love. I wouldn't put it in my top 10, probably even my top 50, but I can respect that it is a good movie.
I'm still blown away that both my parents loved it in
I'm
their
shocked
90s.
that your mom loved it.
Yeah, well, she
90-year-old little Oma who only watches sewing shows.
She loves
It's
she loves
shocking.
human stories, and the whole PTSD thing really she appreciated. Anyhow, I have to say, Vinny, thank you so much for doing this. I mean, you are the best, and I'm not kidding when I say I'm a huge fan. And my wife, she listens to you all the time. She's read your book cover to cover.
She thinks your podcasts are inspirational.
Well, can I say this? If you ever do The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, or Hang 'em High, let me know. Because I know you did, was it Paleface or High Plains Drifter? Which one did you do?
Pale Rider.
Yeah, Pale Rider. What did I say? Pale Rider. Yeah. If
Or
you ever do
Cobra, as you said.
Or Cobra, which is the best, worst movie I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, I've debated that movie on the Adam Carolla show for hours.
I know.
It doesn't get any worse than that movie, but you can't stop watching it.
Cutting pizza with scissors.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
man.
he does the slow shoe drop out of the car twice, where the car door opens and you see the boot come out of the car slowly. It's the worst trope in the world, and it's the only movie where they do it twice. Yeah.
If we do that movie, we need to book 3 hours though, because I don't think an hour is going to get us through that.
It's going to take some time. It's going to, yeah. But nothing in that movie makes sense. Like nothing.
Which is why it's the best.
Ever. It's so bad that you can't stop watching it.
I can't wait. Now I'm excited to have you back on for that because I need to see that movie.
So,
Okay, guys. I have to go change my diapers. So
you go change your diaper.
Keep that.
And, I just want to thank Vinny again. I mean, honestly, we're so happy that you joined us. This has been super fun. And I think I already plugged you, but where do you want to send people to find you? VinnieTortorich.com?
Yeah, that's good enough. They'll see what we're doing, and maybe they'll like what we're doing. Maybe they'll hate it, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Thanks, Vinny. You're the best. See you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
It was nice to meet you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Yeah, it was really fun. Nice to meet you. Bye.